So I was talking with one of my friends today, and in our conversation, he asked me essentially, how do farmers make money? And in all honesty, as much as I tried to explain it to him, I don't think I did a good enough job. But ultimately, it gave me the idea for this video. And I think as we see more and more people wanting to return to that farming lifestyle and wanting to essentially get into a position to where they control their food as well as their financial future, I think it is important that we kind of discuss how farmers make their money so that whenever we get into these endeavors and into these different things, we're not going in blind. So I probably want to breaking this video into two parts depending on how long it is, but I'm gonna do my best to squeeze it into one. The first thing is let's look at it from what I would consider to be your smaller operations, right? And that is I'm going to say anybody that's operating in less than 100 acres. Um, and it also depends on if you're going conventional or regenerative, but for the most part, we're going to go regenerative to start. So I've talked about this in a couple of other videos. Typically, a regenerative operation is going to make money in the same way that your typical business would, right? You're going to have your operations, you're going to have your cattle, your products, your, ointments or whatever it is that you're making. And from there, you're going to have a market that you sell to. A lot of times they will do, things such as like farmers markets. More and more nowadays, you see people selling online. And it comes with its own strings, right? And we're not going to dig too deep into kind of the bureaucracy and the red tape and everything of that nature. But if you think about it from streamlining the process or a process flow, it would essentially be you have your land, you have what you operate on your land, and then you have whatever apparatus it is that you conduct commerce on. So if I have land and I start a garden, then that garden is going to produce some sort of yield, whether it's wheat, whether it's corn, fruit, vegetables, any of that nature. It's going to yield some kind of fruit, some kind of product. And then from there, I either can have people come pick that product or I can have that product packaged and shipped to people, or I can take that product to people where they can buy it directly from me via a farmer's market or something like that, or one of those. I know a lot of people are doing those stands now at the front of their homes or somewhere near where people can come pick up, drop off the cash, pick up their product, and go on about their business. Um, Another way is value added products, right? Like, so you're taking your whole commodity and you're turning it into something that other people can use, right? You're turning it into a more usable thing, a processed item. So instead of you selling the wheat and the butter and the eggs and the milk and everything separately, you might sell bread or you might sell baked goods or you might sell cheese or you might sell ointments and butters and soaps, something like that, right? Where you're taking these raw goods that these animals produce, you put a little bit of blood, sweat, and tears into it, and then boom, now you have a commodity that you can sell, that people will buy. Another way is the fortunate thing, especially when it comes to selling certain meats, is that you can sell directly to a restaurant and you can contract yourself out to a restaurant. And a lot of local restaurants are doing locally grown, locally sourced, small farmer, hey, we want to be able to shake your hand and look you in the eye operations. They're doing where they will go and buy from a small farmer and just buy out all of his pigs for the foreseeable future, right? If you raise a pig, we want it, right? And that's something that's become more and more recent. But it's also becoming more prevalent because restaurants are starting to notice the drop in quality in conventional farming, as well as they want to be able to speak to the morality of where their food comes from, because a lot of people are becoming more conscious as to the treatment of the animals that they consume. All that to say, your biggest thing is going to be to make sure that you have a sustainable product, something that you can grow regularly, whether it's animals, whether it's plants, or even if it's the value added services that you provide in terms of making these different, soaps or butters or cheese or bread or whatever it is, something that you could do sustainably. You got to have a sustainable product. You got to have a market for it, meaning it's got to be a place where it can get sold to. And then also you have to have the customer base, a sustainable customer base, a sustained customer base is kind of the biggest one where these people who are buying your products are the same people, what I'm saying? And they're not only buying your products, they're not only your customers, but they're also partly your marketers, right? Like you need those people to say, hey, I bought this soap from Chris. He told me what it was cold processed, it was this, that, and the third, but it was the best soap ever, and I want you to get some, so I'm going to buy it for you so you could try it. And then now you've got two customers, or maybe a customer and a half. Maybe they'll buy here and there or something like that, right? But you gotta have that sustained market, and either you're going to do that via, excuse me, you're either going to do that by marketing online or by word of mouth, right? I've seen plenty of people who started off selling small items such as, soaps, meat, cheese, or something like that to their family, just to kind of hedge their bets and make ends meet. And then subsequently, because their families were using those products, other people got a chance to try those products, fell in love with the products, boom, there you go, right? Or a lot of what people are trying to do now, which I'm not going to 100% say they're doing a fantastic job of it, is market via vlog. And what I mean by that is they're showing you the process, they're showing you the day to day, they're posting videos, they're posting stories, they're posting pictures of them interacting with the animals, interacting on the farm, doing the processes that you're seeing them produce the products with. And then from there, they're hoping that because you're able to see that process end to end, it will incentivize you to want to participate in something that literally everything that's gone into it from day one to slaughter, or from day one to harvest, or from day one to packaging, and it's going out the door. But marketing is probably one of the biggest pieces, especially as we talk about the regenerative side of things, because a lot of farms are not seen, they're not known, and they're not able to make as much money because their marketing isn't up to the level that it would need to be to sustain the operation that they have. So we said you have a product, you have some sort of way for that product to be shipped and or bought. So a commerce conduit, and then you also have your market. And then the last thing would be making sure that your operation is in the black, right? And this is where your efficiencies come in. How can I produce this same quality product without cutting any corners, and then still make, all of the money that I need to make from this so that I'm not in the black, right? And that comes from not buying a bunch of things that you don't need, not buying things for the aesthetic, but buy things for their usefulness until you can afford the aesthetic. And then also making sure that you're not losing your product, right? Like you don't want to go and say, hey, I'm going to do fruit trees, but you're losing half of your yield because you're not taking care of your trees properly, or you're losing X amount of pounds of meat per animal because you haven't taken care of those animals and they're getting sick or they're dying, things of that nature. Because that also incurs a cost, right? And then your infrastructure. How much are you paying for fencing? How much are you paying for shelter, water, minerals, things like that, feed, right? So every animal, for the most part, depending on what operation you're running, is going to need feed of some sort, whether it's hay for a grass fed, grass finished, or whether it's corn or something like that for your birds, or even for your lambs and things of that nature. Sometimes people do supplement with grain and supplement with other types of feed during lambing and things of that nature, right? So the best way to make money in that aspect is either to grow it yourself and kind of have your own little synergistic piece, or partner with somebody, right, and get things in bulk, or go to a co-op and get things in bulk and get it that way. So you're going to have to account for those prices and account for those costs, as well as the taxes, as well as all of the other things that are going to come with you running a business, right? So the other piece about making money is you have to understand how to expand, how to grow. And I think I covered that in another video, so I'm not going to go too deep into that. But you also have to understand, like, there's a certain level of growth that has to happen, right? Because certain prices are not going to go up or down. Certain prices are going to stay pretty consistent, but others are going to fluctuate fairly rapidly. And things are going to happen. There are going to be fences that break. There are going to be animals that get out. There are going to be animals that get sick, right? So making sure that you can consistently put yourself in the best position to where when you look at your costs and you look at what you're making in profit, that you're consistently in the black. That's how you're going to make money. And that also means being able to allow that life, which this is the beauty of, what I'm saying, farming in general, and it's something I've covered a lot, allowing that regenerative process of grass to regrow, right? And that's why I push regenerative farming so hard, because you can cut down the grass with the animals, you can cut down the grass with a machine, but you have to allow that grass to regrow and allow that cycle to continue, because what's going to happen is you're going to be able to regraze that. You're going to be able to replace that animal. You're going to be able to essentially use the natural cycle of life in order to sustain your farm. You might buy a cow or two cows initially, and then boom, here it is 5 years later. Those two cows may have given you three more cows, and now you have five, right? And that's not to say that these are five fully grown cows, but these are three more opportunities for you to expand, and it happens in an exponential way. The same thing can be done with chickens, the same thing can be done with fruit. Each fruit has a seed that can grow into its own plant, and it's going to also produce another set of fruit with seeds. So ultimately, your initial buy, if you buy once and really take care of that thing that you bought, it could potentially be the thing that creates the wealth that you're trying to achieve through farming. As far as the large operations go, it's a little bit different because I think the larger your operation gets, the more specialized you become. And when I say the more specialized you become, typically you don't see cow calf specific operations until they reach a certain level of head of cattle, right? You don't typically see people go into being specifically meat packers without there being some level of herd that they're able to attain and get access to feed out to slaughter. And then especially when you're talking about being a person on the packing and processing end of anything, scale matters, right? And I did a short that covered the economies of scale to talk about why the prices for small farms seem to be so high per pound versus the prices for these large operations. When you're working in the tens and the 20s, it takes a lot more per cow in order to sustain, let's say, a $50,000 check at the end of the year, which, as we know in today's economy, is nothing, versus when you're dealing in the hundreds of thousands, it literally takes nothing to get you a $50,000 check, right? So that's what you're dealing with, right? So when it comes to these large scale operations, a lot of times the way that they make their money is hedging their bets on the front end, meaning, and this is going to get into the futures market a little bit. If you think about the way a coupon works, a coupon says that I can buy a pack of cheese for X amount of dollars at any given price until this contract ends, right? Until this coupon ends. It's an agreement between you and the store that says, hey, you guys put this out. I got it. I want to buy this cheese and I want to buy it at this price. It's the same thing that happens within any of the agricultural markets where you're taking the idea of I'm a farmer and I have all of my life invested into this field of corn. And I want to make sure that I at least can sell at whatever price the corn is. I can sell enough corn to where I break even. Meaning, I don't want it to be where we get to the end of the season, everybody's putting their corn out there and the price drops because we already talked about supply and demand. I want it to be where at the end of the season, I can at least guarantee myself to sell X amount of bushels that'll keep me from going out of business, or at least it'll make it to where if I have to take a loss, I can take a loss and feel comfortable because I'm covered. So they'll make a contract with a large grain buyer, or in the case of cattle, you'll make a contract with a packer, or you'll make a contract with a feedlot or something of that nature to say, hey, we're going to buy whatever you're producing at this price at a set limit, whether it's in live pounds of animal or whether it's in bushels of corn or whatever, right? We're going to buy it at set price. So that way, at the end of the season, whether it goes up or down, you're going to sell at this price. And it also means we're going to buy at this price. And it kind of protects both ends, meaning on the front end, the producer, being the farmer, is protected because he can guarantee or she can guarantee that she's going to get a minimum price for the amount of corn or the amount of live animal weight that they've promised to sell to these packers. And it's a contractual agreement. The processor or the packer is going to be able to buy at a minimum price so that if the farm business goes through the roof and all of the stuff goes up stupid high, they can guarantee that they're paying at least X amount of live pounds is going to be this minimum amount of dollars, right? And it keeps them from paying a stupid high cost for all of their stuff, which in essence would trickle down to the person, the consumer. So on the front end, the producer is protected because they're getting the minimum they need to survive. And then if they're smart, what they'll do is they'll hedge their bets, meaning instead of selling all of their corn at that price, they'll sell just enough to guarantee they're going to break even via other ventures or something of that nature. And then they'll kind of subject the rest of their harvest to the wind, meaning like we're going to allow the market to dictate. So if there's a bad crop for the year and the price goes through the roof, that farmer makes a ton more money because at the end of the day, they lost some money on those bushels that they contracted out, but they gained a lot more money on the bushels that they didn't contract out. So they hedged their bets by hedging and guaranteeing themselves to stay in the black. But how far in the black they went was determined by the price that the rest of those bushels sold for. On the other end, the packer is hedging their bets so that they can protect their margin. If I buy a minimum of X amount of bushels at this low price, if the market soars through the roof, that means I'm going to make sure I protect at least X amount of my margin from being eaten up by the high prices, because the high prices are going to mean that I'm going to lose money per bushel or lose money per pound of animal weight. The opposite also works, right? If I, as the producer, get a contract that says I'm going to sell at X amount of price, and then the price goes completely down, that means at least I'm guaranteeing I'm going to make this amount of money because I've already sold to the producer, I mean, to the packers at this price. And then everything else, yeah, I might lose some money on each of these bushels, but at least I've guaranteed that I'm somewhat in the black, right? On the other end of that spectrum, the packer is happy when the price drops because now, even though it's high priced on this contract, the rest that I'm buying is going to be way lower than that, which means my margin increases because the cost to buy those goods is lower. Altogether, when it really boils down, it still comes to an efficient process, adequate marketing, and having a sustainable product. But when it comes to farmers figuring out where they fall on the spectrum, I personally believe that if you're on a small end, you should just worry about having a good process, something that's small, scalable, that you can guarantee and sustain your market to, rather than worrying about cattle futures. I think cattle futures is something that ranchers typically have to deal with. And because they have to deal with that, you see a lot of farms hedging their bets and losing the game because, as we've seen in the politics lately, there has been an influx of foreign entities coming in and providing these commodities. Namely, when you think about the grain market, it used to be that China was our biggest buyer of soybeans. And because of the tariffs and things that are going on, that's no longer the case. And they have outsourced it to Argentina. So a lot of farms who were counting on the futures market to guarantee them X amount of money to come in and sustain their bills, it's not going to happen anymore. And a lot of farms are having to close up shop. The same thing has happened in the cattle industry, with Argentina also coming in and bringing in their foreign meat. So just be careful as you start to expand and as you start to learn things. Hedge your bets the right way, right? Hedge your bets by lowering your input costs. Hedge your bets by creating sustainable and replicable processes. Make sure that you're understanding everything that you need to have end to end, but also make sure that there's nothing that's happening in your process that could go awry to the point where you cannot recover. And the reason I say that is I've always talked about having loans and being outstanding on debt is what kills a lot of farms. And namely, when it comes to these things in terms of these futures markets and the things that people play with, a lot of the times they have to try to set these prices higher than what they're actually worth because they have so much debt on the back end. So if you are a small farmer, make sure that you're doing what you can to mitigate the amount of money that you have subject to debt and subject to loans and contracts that you have to pay out, and make sure that all the money that you can keep to yourself, you do keep to yourself. You can always experiment, you can always learn, you can always try and do some R&R, but do it with the understanding of a business mindset and not a hobby mindset. When it comes to a hobby, I throw away money into a hobby because it's something I enjoy, it's something fun. But if it's a business and it's something I'm hoping to make money from, I have to be very calculated in the moves that I make. I hope this video was helpful to some of you guys, and hopefully it was also informational. If you like more videos like this, let me know in the comments what other videos you want to see. Like, share, and subscribe. Peace.